Hey everyone, and welcome back. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into the grimy, chaotic, and frankly, miserable world of historical pirates. I know what you're picturing: wild adventures across the high seas, glittering treasure chests overflowing with gold, and maybe a witty talking parrot on your shoulder. But the reality, it's a lot darker, significantly smellier, and filled with way more screaming than you probably signed up for. So, before we get too comfortable, if you enjoy the stories we explore here, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel grow. And I'd love it if you drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see who's up late with me from all corners of the globe. Alright, let's set the scene. Dim the lights, maybe get a fan going for that gentle background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all starts with a mistake, or maybe just a string of terrible luck. Or perhaps, it's as simple as being in the wrong port at the wrong time. Imagine this: you're a sailor. You've been working the merchant routes, hauling cargo through the treacherous waters of the Caribbean. Life isn't glamorous, but it has a rhythm. It's predictable. Then, one day, a shadow appears on the horizon. It's a ship that looks like it's barely holding itself together, yet it moves with an unnerving speed, like it's possessed. Maybe you see a black flag, or maybe you don't. You won't even have a moment to properly panic before the deafening roar of cannon fire rips through the air, and your ship's hull explodes. Splinters of wood fly like shrapnel. You hear your captains scream, and then they board. Pirates aren't gentle. Forget the swashbuckling charm you've seen in movies. These men are hardened, desperate, and violent. They swarm your deck, screaming curses, waving rusty cutlasses, and firing pistols that fill the air with the acrid smell of burning metal and gunpowder. You don't fight back. Very few do. You drop your knife, raise your hands, and you hope. You hope they'll just take the cargo and leave. You hope they'll let you live. But lucky has a very different meaning out here on the open water. The luckiest among you get pressed ganged. You're dragged, kicking and struggling, onto their pirate ship, shoved below decks, and told in no uncertain terms, "You're one of us now. Say goodbye to your old life." Just like that, you've been forcibly recruited into one of the most brutal jobs on earth. The first thing they do is strip you of your clothes. Whatever you owned now belongs to them. You're handed a crusty, salt-stiffened shirt, a pair of trousers that are either too tight or falling off, and a pair of boots that probably squish with seawater when you walk. Congratulations, you're now part of the crew. But crew mostly means you LLB scrubbing decks covered in things you don't want to identify, taking harsh orders, and learning very quickly never to question the man with the biggest hat and the loudest voice. While some men might have begged to join, dreaming of gold and a life of freedom, you didn't get that choice. You're still trembling from the violent attack when a grizzled pirate smacks you on the back hard enough to make you stumble, and gruffly calls you green meat. And trust me, that is not a compliment. Your new life is a constant assault on the senses. The ship itself is a floating slum. It stinks of unwashed bodies, stale bilge water, rotting food, and cheap rum. Below decks, it's cramped, dark, and airless. You're packed in with dozens of other men, sleeping in shifts, in swaying, flea-infested hammocks. There's no privacy, no quiet, and no escape from the relentless rocking of the sea. Food, if you can call it that, is a daily gamble. You're lucky if you get a ration of hardtack, a biscuit so hard you risk breaking a tooth, and some salted meat that's likely crawling with maggots. Sailors would often eat in the dark, so they wouldn't have to see what they were putting in their mouths. Fresh water is more precious than gold, and what you get is often slimy and tastes of the barrel it's been sitting in for weeks. Disease spreads like wildfire in these conditions. Scurvy, dysentery, typhoid, these are your constant companions. A simple cut can fester and lead to a gruesome infection, and the ship's surgeon is usually just the cook, whose primary medical tool is a saw for amputations, with no anesthetic but a swig of rum. Discipline is brutal and swift. Pirate crews often operated under a strict code of articles, which you'd have to swear an oath on. Breaking a rule, could mean a lashing with a cat o' nine tails, a whip that would shred the skin from your back. More serious offenses, like fighting on board or desertion, could lead to being marooned on a deserted island with nothing but a pistol, a single shot, and a bottle of water. It was a slow, agonizing death sentence. You learn to keep your head down, do your work, and trust no one. Your crewmates aren't your friends, they're your rivals, each one just as desperate and dangerous as the next. The dream of treasure keeps them going, but the reality for most is a short, violent life ending in a watery grave or at the end of a rope. This isn't an adventure, it's a nightmare you can't wake up from. Remember the stench, the fear, and the sheer, unending misery that was the true pirate's life. It was a world built on violence and desperation, a far cry from the romantic tales we tell ourselves today. So, you've been press-ganged, huh? Your first night on this floating prison is pure misery. The ship lurches back and forth, a constant, nauseating rhythm designed to toss you into the icy Black Sea. Forget a soft bed, you're sleeping on a damp, splintered board. The air in your new bedroom is a thick cocktail of moldy bread, sweat, and despair. And just when you think you might drift off, the guy next to you starts snoring. It's not a normal snore. It's a gut-wrenching, rattling sound, like he's actively trying to suffocate himself. You're starving, but your search for a kitchen ends in disappointment. There isn't one. Instead, there's a greasy man everyone calls Cookie, his culinary specialty. Boiling unidentifiable animal parts into a gray sludge that smells exactly like defeat. This isn't the grand adventure you read about in stories. This is a trap, and you just walked right into it. This is how it happened for so many. Historically, a huge number of pirates were never volunteers. They were sailors, merchants, or fishermen whose ships were captured. They were given a simple choice: join us or die. A famous example is Captain Kidd's crew. When they were eventually captured, many of them swore they were forced to become pirates against their will. Once you're on that ship, there's no going back. Refusing to participate wasn't an option. There was no HR department, no 2 weeks notice. Saying no meant a quick trip overboard, or something much, much slower and more painful. The pirate life was a life sentence, cut short only by a blade, a cannonball, or the hangman's noose. The pirate ship operates under its own brutal code. Once you're officially part of the crew, you're expected to pull your weight. There's zero tolerance for slackers or complainers. See that guy over there, the one who was moaning about the work? Yesterday, they tied him to the main mast. The crack of the whip echoed across the deck, and when they were done, his back looked like a butcher's diagram. You learn very quickly to keep your head down, your mouth shut, and do exactly what you're told. You learn fast, or you suffer. It's that simple. But here's where things get really weird. Amidst all the violence and squalor, there's a twisted, almost shocking sense of fairness. It's governed by something called the Articles of Agreement. Think of it as a pirate constitution. Before a voyage even began, every man on board had to sign or make his mark on these articles. This document laid out the rules for everything: punishments for breaking the code, compensation for injuries, and most importantly, how the plunder would be divided. This wasn't some top-down system. Many pirate crews operated with a surprising level of democracy. The captain, the fearsome leader of this band of cutthroats, could actually be voted out of office if the crew lost faith in him. Big decisions, like whether to attack a certain ship or where to sail next, were often put to a vote. Everyone, from the quartermaster down to the newest recruit, that you got a say. It's like the worst, most dangerous job imaginable, but with a bizarrely progressive workplace structure. The only catch is that your coworkers smell like a 3-week-old fish market and prefer to settle HR disputes with daggers and pistols. Now, don't get too excited about that share of the treasure they promised you. Those articles might guarantee you a piece of the pie, but there's a massive catch. You don't get paid a single gold coin until the next successful raid, and there are absolutely no guarantees about when or if that will ever happen. Weeks, maybe months, could pass between successful captures. Until then, you are just an expendable body. Another pair of hands to scrub the deck, patch the sails, and bail out the constantly leaking hull. For now, your only job is to help keep this rotting tub afloat as it limps through hostile waters. And believe me, those waters are hostile. It's not just the Royal Navy hunting you down. You're at the mercy of hurricanes that can appear out of nowhere and tear the ship to pieces. You're a target for other pirate crews who see you as competition, or worse, as easy prey. Even your own ship feels like it's actively trying to kill you. The wood groans, the ropes fray, and with every creak, you wonder if this is the moment it all falls apart and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. There is a common saying, you'll hear a lot on board. The sea takes what it wants. The man who first tells you this is a grizzled old sailor with a permanent squint. He's missing 2 fingers on his right hand, and when he speaks, a gap in his teeth makes a little whistling sound. You can't help but ask him what happened to his fingers. He just grunts, a dark look in his eyes. "Bad, Captain," he says, and then turns away, leaving you to wonder what other horrors await you on this cursed voyage. You are no longer the master of your fate. You belong to the ship and to the sea, and neither one is known for its kindness. Ever wonder how someone really becomes a pirate? Forget the swashbuckling movies. For many, it wasn't a choice. Historians debate how common forced recruitment, or press ganging, truly was. Some say most pirates signed up willingly, chasing freedom and fortune. Others argue that, especially during the golden age of piracy, coercion was the norm. Royal navies treated their sailors terribly, so pirate ships, despite their reputation, sometimes seemed like the lesser of 2 evils. But for you, in this story, let's just say you didn't volunteer. Your new life is a blur of misery. You spend your days swabbing filthy decks, scrambling up rigging that tears your hands raw, and hauling ropes until your shoulders scream. Every night, you collapse into your hammock and pretend the dampness on your face is just sea spray, not tears. Hunger is a constant, gnawing companion. The man in the hammock next to you coughs up blood, a sound that becomes part of the ship's grim soundtrack. The endless, sickening roll of the vessel makes you dream of solid ground. Not a tropical beach, just stillness. Earth that doesn't heave and sway like a drunkard's gut. You find yourself staring at the vast, empty horizon, and a dangerous thought creeps in. What if you just jumped? It's a dark whisper, but it won't be your last. Welcome to the crew. You're a pirate now. And if you think this is as bad as it gets, oh, you sweet, naive little landlubber, this is only the beginning. There's a moment, maybe a week in, when the full weight of your situation crashes down on you. It's a quiet, devastating realization. You're never going home. Not really. Not to your village, your family, your own bed. That life, that person you were, is gone. Any fantasy of escape you clung to has evaporated into the sea mist. You're hundreds of miles from shore, surrounded by the dregs of society, living on what feels like a floating coffin. This ship is your entire world now, and everything you once knew might as well be on the moon. The Pirate's Code you heard about, the promise of democracy and a fair share. It's a nice story, but right now, you're just cheap labor. Your share of the plunder is a stale biscuit and the right to not be thrown overboard. The camaraderie, it's the bond of shared misery, a pack of wolves eyeing each other, waiting for the first sign of weakness. You never realized how much you loved land until it was gone. You missed the strangest, smallest things. The simple act of walking in a straight line for more than 20 feet, the smell of damp earth after rain, the sight of green grass, birds that sing instead of screeching like demons, the taste of fresh bread, warm from the oven, even the distant chime of church bells, a sound you barely noticed before, now echoes in your memory like a half-forgotten lullaby. Here, the only music is the groaning of the ship's timbers, the snap of the sails, and the constant, hateful shriek of the wind. Your legs are in a perpetual state of rebellion. You stumble into bulkheads, trip over coils of rope, and at least once a day, you swear the floor is tilting just to mock you. Spoiler alert, it is. This is your life now, a constant, dizzying dance with the ocean, and privacy. Forget about it. That concept died the moment you were dragged aboard. Below deck, you're packed in like salted fish in a barrel. You sleep shoulder to shoulder, on creaky planks or in hammocks that smell of mildew and despair. Everyone breathes the same thick, sour air. There is no silence, ever. There are always conversations, arguments erupting over a dropped coin, groans of the sick and injured, men muttering threats in their sleep, and a symphony of snoring that could drown out a cannon blast. And the smell. Oh, the smell. It's a complex bouquet. Imagine old cheese left to bake in the sun, blended with the aroma of unwashed bodies, a hint of bilge water, and a bold, undeniable note of raw sewage. If hell has a signature scent, it probably took inspiration from the bowels of a pirate ship. You learn quickly that survival means becoming invisible. You keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your eyes open. You learn to read the crew's moods like you read the weather. The quartermaster, with his one good eye, seems to see everything. The bosun, a mountain of a man with scarred knuckles, enforces discipline with a rope's end. You watch them, learn who to avoid, who to obey without question, and who might be a crack in the wall of this floating prison. You do your work, eat your disgusting food, and try not to make eye contact. Every face is a mask of cruelty, desperation, or madness. You see a man get his hand crushed for a clumsy mistake. You see another flogged for stealing a sip of rum. This isn't a band of merry rebels. It's a floating penal colony where the only law is force. But then, something shifts. Slowly, imperceptibly. Maybe it's the third month at sea. The constant rocking becomes your new normal. Your hands, once soft, are now calloused and tough. You can climb the rigging without freezing in terror, your muscles remembering the rhythm. You start to understand the ship's language, the subtle creaks that signal a change in the wind, the way the deck feels under your feet before a storm. You learn the names of the sails, the knots, the stars that guide you through the crushing darkness. You are no longer just a victim. You're becoming a part of the machine. A very small, terrified part, but a part nonetheless. You share a stolen piece of fruit with another new recruit, a boy no older than you, and for a moment, you see the same fear in his eyes. It's not friendship, not yet, but it's a flicker of connection in the overwhelming loneliness. Then comes the first real storm. It's not just rain and wind, it's the apocalypse. The sky turns black, and the ocean rises up to swallow you whole. Waves like liquid mountains crash over the deck, sweeping away anything not tied down. The ship groans like a dying beast, and you are certain this is the end. You're clinging to a mast for dear life, soaked, frozen, and praying to a god you'd long forgotten. But you work. Alongside the very men who terrified you, you fight to keep the ship alive. You haul on ropes with bleeding hands, you bail water, you secure the cannons. In the heart of the chaos, there's a strange clarity. There's no time for fear, only for action. When the storm finally breaks and the sun bleeds back into the sky, the ship is battered but afloat, and you are still alive. You look at the exhausted, bruised faces around you, and a new feeling emerges. It's not pride, not yet. It's the grim satisfaction of survival. You faced death, and you didn't break. Slowly, you begin to change. The landlubber you were is being stripped away, layer by miserable layer. You learn to fight, first with your fists over a scrap of food, then with a knife. Your first real battle is a blur of noise, smoke, and primal fear. But you live, and with survival comes a tiny sliver of the loot, a few silver coins. It's not a fortune, but it's more money than you've ever held in your life. You buy a better knife, a swig of rum that actually burns in a good way. The hunger is still there, but now it's sharper, more focused. It's no longer just a hunger for food, but for something more, for a bigger share, for respect, for power. The naive boy who dreamt of solid ground is fading. In his place, a harder, colder creature is being born. One who understands the world for what it is, a brutal place where you either eat or are eaten. You stare at the horizon again, but this time, you're not thinking about jumping. You're scanning for sails. You're hunting, because this isn't just your prison anymore. This is your territory. And the pirate you were forced to become is now the only person you know how to be. You think you're signing up for a life of adventure, but your first task is just trying to survive the crew. You cautiously try to make friends, or at least avoid making enemies. There's One-Eyed Joe, who claims he lost his eye in a duel with a Spanish assassin. Though you hear whispers it was just a clumsy bar brawl. Then there's Knuckles, a hulking brute who, for reasons you dare not ask, collects other people's teeth. And don't even get me started on Whisper, a guy who's always smiling but never says a word. He's honestly terrifying. Compared to Chatter Jack, who has full-blown conversations with his belt, these guys are almost normal. You quickly realize you read the odd one out because you, Don T, have a nickname yet. But don't worry, they tell you it'll come, usually after you do something incredibly embarrassing. Mealtimes are, let's say, a unique experience. The ship's menu features salted meat that's mostly bone, hardtack biscuits with extra protein in the form of baked-in bugs, and a jar of something that might have once been pickled cabbage. The saving grace: rum. Lots and lots of rum. But it's not for celebrating, it's for numbing the misery. You learn that everyone here drinks, not for fun, but to cope. The food is so disgusting, you start getting jealous of the ship's rats. They honestly look healthier than half the crew. Fresh water is rationed, and each sip tastes like rust and regret. And personal hygiene, forget about it. The only bath you'll get is during a rainstorm, and you'll have to fight 10 other guys for a decent spot under the downpour. Your clothes are perpetually damp, and your socks have become a certified biological hazard. You're starting to itch in places you didn't even know existed. Welcome to the glamorous life of a pirate. Now, for a little history lesson. You might think pirates were all about chaos, but they actually had some of the strictest rules at sea, especially about supplies. Despite their lawless reputation, many crews kept detailed inventories and were fiercely protective of their rations. Wasting fresh water could earn you a flogging. Stealing another man's food, that could get you killed. On some ships, the punishment was being marooned left on a deserted island with a pistol and a single bullet. So, no, it wasn't a constant party with roasted pigs and endless rum. And let's not forget the chores. On a pirate ship, everyone pulls their weight. Your duties include scrubbing the deck with sand and salt water until your hands are raw, patching torn sails while clinging to a swaying mast hundreds of feet above the waves, and, the worst job of all, cleaning the bilge. The bilge is the lowest, darkest part of the ship, where all the foul, stagnant water and waste collects. It's as delightful as it sounds. You spend hours wading through knee-deep sludge that smells like pure despair. The other day, a guy down there with me swore he saw a crab with 3 eyes. At this point, I don't know whether to believe him or just start crying. So, the next time you picture pirates as swashbuckling heroes, remember the reality, the terrible food, the constant filth, the back-breaking labor, and a crew of deeply strange and dangerous individuals. It was less yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum, and more oh-no-no and a bucket of bilge water. Ever dreamed of a pirate's life? The open sea, the treasure, the freedom. Well, let me tell you what it's really asterisk-like. It's less yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum, and more oh no, no. What have I gotten myself into? Forget the dashing heroes you see in movies. Your new crewmates are a motley bunch, and that's putting it nicely. There's One-Eyed Joe. He'll tell you he lost his eye in a swashbuckling duel with a Spanish assassin. The truth, he picked a fight with the wrong guy in a dockside tavern. Then there's Knuckles, a mountain of a man who has a rather unsettling collection of other people's teeth. You learn very quickly not to ask questions you don't want the answers to. The creepiest of all might be Whisper. He's always there, always smiling, but never, ever says a single word. He just watches, and you stick out like a sore thumb. Why? Because you don't have a nickname yet. But don't you worry, that'll come, usually after you do something incredibly embarrassing. So, you've got that to look forward to. Now, let's talk about the fine dining experience aboard this floating paradise. Mealtimes are, an adventure. The ship's cook, a man who looks like he's personally fought every fish in the sea, serves up what can only be described as culinary despair. The main course is salted meat, which is really just a fancy term for a leathery, briny piece of something that's about 90% bone and 10% mystery. It's so tough, you could use it to patch a hole in the hull. Then we have the famous hardtack biscuits. These aren't your grandma's buttery delights. They're dense, flour and water bricks that could shatter your teeth, and the little black specks baked in. Oh, that's not pepper. Those are weevils. Extra protein, they say. You learn to tap the biscuit on the table before you eat it, to knock a few of them out. Or you just close your eyes and pretend it's a poppy seed muffin. To wash it all down, there's a delightful substance that might have been pickled cabbage in a former life. Now, it's a slimy, gray mush that tastes like regret. Honestly, the ship's rats are eating better than we are. Fresh water is the real treasure. It's rationed out in tiny amounts, and what you do get tastes like rust and old metal. And personal hygiene. What's that? The only bath you're getting is during the occasional rainstorm. You're constantly damp. Your clothes have a permanent smell of salt and mildew. And let's just say your socks could probably stand up on their own. Now, here's a little historical fact that might surprise you. Despite their lawless reputation, many pirate crews operated under incredibly strict rules. They had articles, a code of conduct everyone had to sign. Think of it as the world's most dangerous HR policy. They kept careful track of every barrel of water and every biscuit. Wasting supplies was a serious offense. If you were caught wasting fresh water, you could expect a flogging. Stealing food from a crewmate, it was often a capital offense. You could be executed right there on deck, or maybe worse, marooned, left on a deserted island with a pistol, one bullet, and a bottle of water. The bullet wasn't for hunting. And just in case you thought you could kick back and enjoy the sea breeze, think again. There are no passengers on a pirate ship. Everyone works. The chores are grueling, endless, and disgusting. First up, swabbing the deck. You're on your hands and knees with a block of sandstone, scrubbing the wooden planks raw. Then there's sail mending. When a storm rips a sail, someone has to climb the rigging, swaying hundreds of feet above the churning ocean, and patch it up with a needle and thread. But the worst job, the one everyone dreads, is cleaning the bilge. The bilge is the lowest part of the ship, a dark, foul-smelling pit where all the disgusting liquids collect into a thick, sludgy soup. And it's your job to get in there. You spend hours knee-deep in this vile muck, scooping it into buckets. The smell, it's like rotten eggs, despair, and the ghost of every bad decision ever made, all mixed together. So, the next time you see a pirate in a movie, swinging from a rope with a grin on his face, remember us. Remember the filth, the hunger, and the bone-deep exhaustion. The real treasure wasn't gold or jewels. It was surviving another day. Alright, let's talk about what pirates actually ate, because it wasn't exactly a 5-star cruise. Forget treasure chests for a second. The real challenge was just finding something edible on the high seas. First up, the star of every meal, hardtack. This wasn't bread, it was a punishment. Imagine a brick made of flour and water, baked until it's harder than a cannonball. These things sat in barrels for months, maybe years, getting nice and fossilized. Trying to bite into one was a good way to lose a tooth. The only way to eat it was to soak it in water, grog, or whatever liquid you had until it softened into a mush. But wait, there's a bonus. Hardtack was often crawling with weevils and maggots. These little critters burrowed into the biscuits, and after a few weeks at sea, you had two choices: spend hours picking them out, or just accept the extra protein. Most sailors just closed their eyes and chewed. Hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? Fresh food, that was a dream. Any fruits and vegetables you brought on board were gone within the first couple of weeks. After that, your main source of protein was meat, but not the kind you'd find at a butcher shop. We're talking about beef and pork that had been so heavily salted it was practically mummified. It was stored in barrels, and the smell was, well, let's just say it could compete with the ship's bilge. To make it remotely edible, You had to soak it in water for hours just to draw out some of the salt. Even then, it was tough, stringy, and tasted vaguely of despair. And what did you wash this down with? Water was a precious commodity. It was stored in wooden casks, and after a while, it would turn green with algae and taste foul. It was strictly rationed for drinking only. So, what did everyone drink instead? Beer and rum. Grog, a mix of rum and water, was a daily staple. It kept morale up and helped everyone forget they were drinking slimy water. The constant low-level buzz was just a part of life at sea. The downside, you were in a perpetual state of mild dehydration. Now, let's talk about the ship's cook. Every vessel had one, and he was usually a character. Let's call ours One-Eyed Jack. He probably got the job because he lost a leg in a battle and could unclimb the rigging anymore. His kitchen, the galley, was a tiny, smoky fire hazard below deck. He had one big pot, a questionable knife, and a very limited pantry of salt meat, dried peas, and hardtack. His signature dish was a perpetual stew, often called lobscouse. He'd just keep adding whatever was available into the pot day after day. One day's leftovers became the next day's base. It was hot, it was filling, and you tried not to ask what was in it. Complaining to the cook was a terrible idea. A ladle to the head was a common response. This diet, as you can imagine, had some serious consequences. The biggest killer on the high seas wasn't cannonballs or sword fights. It was scurvy. This brutal disease is caused by a lack of vitamin C. It started subtly. You'd feel tired, your joints would ache, and your gums would get spongy and start to bleed. Then things got worse. Old wounds would reopen. Your teeth would loosen and fall out, and your legs would swell and turn black. Sailors had no idea what caused it. They blamed bad air, laziness, or divine punishment. It wasn't until much later that the British Navy figured out that a daily dose of citrus, like limes, could prevent it. That's why British sailors got the nickname limeys. But for the Golden Age pirate, scurvy was just another terrifying part of the job. So, the next time you see pirates in a movie feasting on roasted pigs and tropical fruit, remember the reality: bug-infested biscuits, salty meat leather, and a creeping disease that made your teeth fall out. It puts a whole new spin on the yo-ho-ho, doesn't it? Ever wonder what pirates actually ate and drank on the high seas? Forget those lavish movie banquets. The reality was, well, a lot less glamorous and a lot more desperate. Let's talk about the booze first. They called it grog. It was a simple, brutal mix: water, rum, and if you were incredibly lucky, a splash of citrus. But let's be real, you usually weren't that lucky. The main purpose of grog wasn't for a good time. It was to kill the nasty bacteria swimming in the stagnant water barrels. It did its job, sure, but it also had the convenient side effect of getting everyone just drunk enough to forget how utterly miserable their lives were. Think of it as an unofficial survival strategy. The only problem: a crew that's constantly a little bit tipsy makes for some very interesting and frankly terrifying moments when they're climbing the rigging in a storm. Imagine trying to tie a knot 100 feet above a raging sea with the world spinning. Yeah, eventful is putting it mildly. After a few weeks at sea, you start to crave the simplest things. Things you never thought you'd miss. Fresh apples, a warm slice of bread, cheese. Oh, you dream about cheese. Not even the fancy stuff. Just a sad little wedge of anything that didn't come out of a barrel, covered in brine and smelling faintly of regret. I remember one guy, poor soul, started talking in his sleep about buttered toast, just muttering buttered toast, ... So warm, ... over and over. And I'll be honest, listening to him made me tear up a little. Butter. What even was butter anymore? Did it ever really exist? Or was it just some beautiful lie we were all told as children? It feels like a myth, a legend from a forgotten time. On a pirate ship, food fights aren't the playful, cinematic brawls you might imagine. They're desperate, grim affairs. I saw a man get caught hoarding a small stash of dried fruit, just a handful of shriveled apricots he'd managed to squirrel away. His punishment: a week in the brig. I didn't even know we had a brig. Turns out, It was just a damp, leaky cupboard near the bilge. They said the rats in there had tattoos, though I think that was just the delirium talking. When the guy finally came out, he was thinner, twitchier, and was mysteriously missing half an eyebrow. Nobody said a word about it, but after that, you could feel the tension. Everyone started watching the food barrels a little more closely, a little more suspiciously. Trust dissolves quickly when hunger is involved. There is a strange psychological shift that happens to you after weeks of eating nothing but hardtack and salted meat. You stop seeing food as something to enjoy. It becomes fuel, a grim necessity you force down to keep going. You eat what you're given, and you try your best not to taste it. Chewing becomes a chore, like clocking in for a shift at a job you absolutely despise. All the joy is just sucked out of the act of eating. It's replaced by a cold, hard calculation. Will this make me sick? Is this piece more weevil than biscuit? Can I even keep this down? Every meal is a gamble, a risk assessment against your own body. You stop thinking about flavor and start thinking purely in terms of survival. Now, here's a little fringe fact for you, something the history books might gloss over. Some pirates held a peculiar belief that eating rats could actually be good for you. It sounds disgusting, I know, but hear me out. The logic was that rats, being the scavengers they are, ate everything. That included scraps of spoiled fruit or other bits of food that might still contain trace amounts of vitamin C. So, in a twisted way, eating a rat could theoretically help ward off scurvy. There are stories, probably exaggerated for effect, of crews chasing rats around the ship's hold with the same enthusiasm as a fox hunt on the most desperate voyages. A plump rat could be considered a delicacy, a rare source of fresh meat. Now, I haven't personally seen anyone cook up a rat ... yet, but I have definitely seen a few hungry sailors eyeing them for just a little too long, a strange glint in their eyes. It makes you wonder what you'd be capable of when starvation truly sets in. So, what about the actual staples? The food you ate day in and day out. The star of the show was ship's biscuit, also known as hardtack. Imagine a cracker, but designed by someone who hates teeth. It was a simple flour and water biscuit, baked until it was as hard as a rock. This stuff was made to last for years, and it did. The downside was that it was often infested with weevils. Weevil larvae, to be precise. Seasoned sailors had a trick for this. They'd tap the biscuit on the table, and the little critters would fall out. Or, if you were eating in the dark, which was common, you just wouldn't see them. As the saying went, the weevils you see are bad, but the ones you don't see are worse. You learned to appreciate the extra protein, whether you wanted to or not. Then came the meat. It was always preserved, either salted or smoked. You'd get huge barrels of salted beef or pork. After months at sea, this meat would become so hard and tough you could carve it like wood. I've seen guys make buttons and small trinkets out of it. To make it even remotely edible, you had to soak it in water for hours, sometimes days, just to draw out some of the overwhelming salt. Even then, it was stringy, tough, and tasted more of the barrel it came from than anything else. It was sustenance, but it was a long, long way from a decent meal. You'd chew and chew until your jaw ached, trying to break it down. And what did you wash it all down with? Water, stored in wooden casks. After a few weeks, this water would become slimy and green with algae. It tasted foul. That's where the grog came in. The rum didn't just kill bacteria. It made the disgusting water palatable. It was a cycle of misery and mild intoxication. Your water is foul, so you add rum. The rum makes you dehydrated, so you need more water. And on it goes. The ship's cook, or doctor, as he was often sarcastically called, had the thankless job of trying to turn this miserable collection of ingredients into something edible. Usually, it involved boiling everything together into a stew of questionable origin. They'd call it lobscouse or salmagundi. You'd get your chunk of salted meat, some crumbled hardtack, maybe an onion if you were lucky, all boiled together into a gray, unappetizing sludge. But when you're cold, wet, and exhausted, a bowl of hot sludge can feel like the most comforting thing in the world. The lack of fresh food, especially fruits and vegetables, led to the most dreaded of all sailor afflictions, scurvy. This vitamin C deficiency was a brutal slow-motion nightmare. Your gums would swell and turn black, your teeth would loosen and fall out, old wounds would reopen, and your joints would ache unbearably. Eventually, it could lead to death. This is why citrus was so valuable. A lime or a lemon was literally a lifesaver. Ships that could restock with fresh fruit were lucky. Those that couldn't watched their crews slowly and painfully waste away. It was a constant, lurking fear that was far more terrifying than any naval battle. The real enemy wasn't another ship's cannons. It was the slow decay from within your own body. So, the next time you see a pirate movie with a grand feast on the captain's table, just remember the reality. Remember the weevils, the rock-hard meat, the slimy water, and the desperate, hungry eyes staring at a scurrying rat. The golden age of piracy was anything but golden when it came to the dinner table. It was a constant struggle for survival, where every meal was a test of your stomach and your will to live. Ever pictured yourself as a swashbuckling pirate, sword in hand, wind in your sails, a life of freedom on the high seas? It sounds romantic, doesn't it? Well, let me paint a slightly different picture. Imagine you're weeks out from any shore, and the worst part of this floating nightmare isn't the maggot-infested hardtack you're eating. It's not even the constant threat of a cannonball turning you into a red mist. No, the real horror starts with a dull throb in your jaw. At first, it's just an annoyance, but soon, your gums are bleeding, your breath could wilt a sail, and the left side of your jaw is pulsing with a pain so intense, it feels like it is trying to escape your skull. You've got a toothache, and out here, on the unforgiving ocean, a simple toothache is a death sentence in disguise. Forget everything you know about modern dentistry. There are no reclining chairs, no sterile tools, no friendly hygienists on a pirate ship. What you have is a man named Gristle. Gristle's claim to fame: he once yanked a musket ball out of a shipmate's head during a hurricane using a rusted hook and a bottle of rum. He's the closest thing you have to a surgeon, and congratulations, you're his next patient. He doesn't bother with a diagnosis. He just squints at your swollen face, grunts, rots deep, and begins heating a pair of iron tongs over a flickering candle. A primal fear grips you. You try to bolt, but he's faster. Remember the constant pain, the filth, and the fear. The romantic image of a pirate's life is just that, a romance. The truth was a grim, agonizing, and often short existence, where your greatest enemy wasn't a naval fleet, but a simple toothache. Video opens with a close-up on a rusty, old-fashioned surgical saw, then slowly pans to a dimly lit scene resembling a ship's cabin. The narrator speaks in a hushed, intense tone. Have you ever wondered what happens after the cannon fire fades and the sword clashes cease? When the thrill of the pirate life gives way to its brutal reality. It's not about treasure chests and parrots on shoulders. It's about survival. And sometimes, survival means losing a piece of yourself. Let's talk about the grim lottery of pirate medicine. Imagine this. A cannon misfires during a drill. A deafening blast, then a horrifying silence. A fellow sailor isn't screaming, not yet. He's just staring at his own arm, now a mangled ruin of bone and flesh, as if it has personally betrayed him. Then, the pain crashes in, a wave of pure agony. In this world, there are no sterile operating rooms, no anesthesiologists, no second opinions. There's just the ship's cook, or maybe the carpenter, who doubles as the surgeon. We'll call him Gristle. He arrives not with a state-of-the-art medical bag, but with the kit. It's a roll of blood-stained cloth, a saw that smells of rust and decay, and a jug of the strongest rum you can find. That rum isn't just for courage, it's the only anesthetic on board. The injured man is strapped down. The crew gathers around, a circle of grim-faced spectators. You don't want to watch, but you can't look away. The decision is brutally simple. If the limb stays, infection will set in, and death is almost certain. If it goes, he might live. That's the entire calculation. It's a desperate gamble, not a medical procedure. Then, the work begins. The sound of the saw cutting through muscle and bone is wet. A sickening crunch that echoes through the wooden planks of the ship and lodges itself deep in your spine. The screams are raw, inhuman, a sound that will haunt your nights for weeks to come. When it's finally over, Gristle, ever the pragmatist, simply tosses the severed limb overboard into the vast, indifferent ocean. He wipes his hands on his pants, and the surgery is complete. The man survives, barely. He wakes up a day later, his relief and horror tangled in a mess of sobs and laughter, and you're left wondering which sound is more disturbing. This wasn't a rare occurrence. Historically, surgery at sea was a horrifying affair. Pirate surgeons were often just failed doctors on the run, or, more commonly, shipwrights who knew how to saw wood and figured a human leg couldn't be all that different. How did they stop the bleeding? With hot tar, they'd sear the wound shut, cauterizing it in the most painful way imaginable. Sutures, they'd use the same thick, dirty thread that had been used to mend the sails just yesterday. The concept of sterilization was centuries away. The ship itself was a floating petri dish, a germ-infested tank where rats might chew on your bandages while you slept. If the amputation didn't kill you, the subsequent infection was always waiting for its chance. Historians still debate the survival rates. Some argue that, given the rugged constitutions of these seafarers, a surprising number might have pulled through, their stories becoming the stuff of legend. Others believe these successes were wildly exaggerated, a way to build the fearsome mythology of the invincible pirate. The truth is, when you went under the saw, you weren't betting on science or medicine. You were betting on sheer, dumb luck. And as any sailor will tell you, luck is as fickle and unpredictable as the sea itself. You've seen the results firsthand. There's the old salt with the wooden peg leg. He walks with a heavy thunk and a permanent grimace etched on his face. He'll tell anyone who listens that he used to be the fastest sailor on the sea, able to climb the rigging in a heartbeat. Now, he spends his days polishing his prosthetic with whale oil, boasting about how he once kicked a man off a plank with his good leg. He's quick to add, he's one of the few who can find a sliver of humor in his loss. The others, they are quieter. They carry their scars, both visible and invisible, with a heavy silence. It's as if the sea took more than just a piece of their body. It took a piece of their spirit, too. Their vacant stares tell a story of a price paid in flesh and bone. a permanent reminder that the pirate's life, for all its romanticized freedom, was often a short and brutal journey into darkness. So the next time you see a pirate in a movie with a hook for a hand or a peg for a leg, remember the reality behind the costume. Remember the rusty saw, the jug of rum, the agonizing screams, and the desperate gamble for one more sunrise. It's a stark reminder that the true cost of treasure was often paid, not in gold, but in blood. You start brushing your teeth with a bit of rag and rum, just in case. You pray you never get a splinter. You avoid Gristle like he's a ghost. You check your limbs every morning like they're inventory. Everything's still attached. Good. You made it another day. Tonight, as the ship groans and the sea slaps against the hull like an angry dog, you lie awake again, staring into the dark, listening to someone 3 hammocks over cough like they're dying. And you think, this can't possibly get worse. You're wrong, of course. You thought pirates were lawless, wild, unhinged. And okay, some of them absolutely are. But here's the twist. Pirate ships have rules. Lots of them. More than you'd expect from a bunch of guys who can't spell authority without stabbing someone halfway through the word. They call it the code. And you better learn it fast. Because ignorance isn't an excuse when the punishment involves whips, knives, or a nice lonely island where you can die of exposure and regret. The code isn't written on fine parchment. It's not even nailed to the mast. It lives in memory and teeth-clenched whispers, passed down like ghost stories, with blood at the margins. The first time you hear it, It's from the quartermaster, a scarred man with a voice like gravel and a nose that's seen too many arguments. He calls you and a few other recruits to the deck and runs through the basics like a school teacher who has already accepted your failure. Rule 1, equal shares. Not exactly what you expected from a group of self-serving criminals. But pirates hate unfair captains more than they hate the Navy. When they take a prize, gold, food, weapons, whatever, it gets divided according to rank. But even the lowest deckhand gets something. No more of that "you get paid in glory" nonsense like back on merchant ships. Out here, everyone wants a cut, and God help you if you try to cheat. Rule 2, keep your gear in check. That includes weapons, clothes, and anything the crew depends on. Lose your pistol in a raid. That's 10 lashes. Let your powder get wet. 20. Forget to clean your musket. You might get tossed overboard just to think about it. The crew doesn't tolerate mistakes, because mistakes out here cost lives and loot. Rule 3 is where it gets personal. No fighting on board. It seems impossible, right? A ship full of cutthroats and they're not allowed to settle their differences. Well, not on deck. If you have a problem with another pirate, you have to wait until you make landfall. Then, you're free to duel it out on shore with pistol or cutlass, to first blood or to the end. The captain doesn't care who wins, as long as you don't damage his ship or his crew while at sea. It's a surprisingly effective way to keep the peace. Then there's the rule about lights out. No candles or lanterns after 8 o'clock at night. If you want to keep drinking, you have to do it on the open deck, in the dark. This isn't about saving wax, it's about fire. On a wooden ship filled with gunpowder and tar, an open flame is a bigger threat than any naval fleet. One careless moment could send everyone to a watery grave. It's a sobering thought, even for the drunkest pirate. And speaking of sober, let's talk about women. This one varies from ship to ship, but many pirate codes strictly forbade bringing a woman on board. The official reason was that it would cause jealousy and fighting among the crew. Any man who snuck a woman on in disguise would face death. This wasn't about morality. It was pure pragmatism. Distractions and disputes could tear a crew apart faster than a cannonball. But perhaps the most surprising rule is about voting. Yes, you heard that right. Pirates were pioneers of democracy on the high seas. The crew voted on everything: where to sail next, whether to attack a ship, even who got to be captain. If the captain became a tyrant, or just proved to be bad at his job, the crew could vote him out. They could just maroon him on an island and elect a new leader on the spot. Imagine that. The captain you serve under is there because you and your shipmates want him there. It's a level of freedom unheard of in the Merchant Marine or the Royal Navy, where you were stuck with your captain no matter how cruel or incompetent he was. This system is held together by the quartermaster. He's not just the guy who doles out supplies. He's the crew's representative, the one who enforces the code and makes sure even the captain plays by the rules. He distributes the loot, hands out punishments, and acts as a counterbalance to the captain's authority. He's the law on a lawless ship. And the punishments, oh, they get creative. Stealing from a fellow pirate is the ultimate betrayal. The punishment was often marooning, where you're left on a deserted island with a pistol, a single shot, and a bottle of water. It was a slow, lonely death sentence. Sometimes, they'd get even more brutal. A practice called keel hauling involved tying a rope to a sailor, throwing him overboard, and dragging him under the ship from one side to the other. The barnacles on the hull would tear his skin to ribbons. Few survived. It was a terrifying deterrent, a reminder that the code wasn't a set of suggestions. It was a matter of life and death. Then there's desertion. If you abandon your post during a battle, you're considered a coward and a traitor. The punishment was almost always death or marooning. In a pirate crew, every man is essential. One man running away could cause a domino effect, leading to a lost battle and the death of everyone on board. Loyalty isn't just a virtue. It's a survival mechanism. There are also rules for injuries sustained in the line of duty. This is another surprisingly progressive part of the code. If you lost a limb in battle, you didn't just get a pat on the back. You received a handsome compensation from the ship's common stock before the rest of the loot was divided. A lost right arm was worth more than a left one, a leg more than an eye. It was an early form of workers' compensation, a promise that the crew would take care of its own. It meant that you could go into a fight knowing that even if you were maimed, you wouldn't be left destitute. So as you lie in your hammock, the ship rocking you like a morbid cradle, you start to understand. This isn't just chaos. This is a society, a brutal, unforgiving, but strangely ordered society. The rules aren't there to restrict your freedom. They're there to ensure the survival and profit of the group. The pirate code turns a chaotic mob of outcasts into a deadly, efficient fighting force. It's a pact signed in blood and sealed with gold. The fear doesn't go away. You still check your limbs every morning. You still flinch when the quartermaster looks your way. But now, there's a sliver of something else. A sense of belonging. You're part of something that, for all its brutality, has a structure. You have a share. You have a vote. You are a pirate. And out here, on the edge of the world, the code is the only thing standing between you and the deep, dark sea. It's a terrifying life, but for the first time, it feels like it might just be your own. So, what do you think? Was the pirate's life more organized than you imagined? Let me know down in the comments which of these rules surprised you the most. Thanks for sailing with me on this journey today. If you enjoyed this dive into the real lives of pirates, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into history's forgotten corners. See you next time.